Hey everyone, thank you once again for joining us. I'm Jennifer Blum and I'm here with Sherry Petipas, and this is our seventh Facebook Live podcast. We hope you had a great 4th of July weekend and maybe have been able to start safely spending some time with friends and family as things are starting to open here in Massachusetts and other states as well. Due to this, things have also been opening within our court systems, and today's focus on the podcast is about impact statements. Before we get started though, I do want to do what we do every podcast, and that is give you the very important numbers for the Domestic Violence National Hotline, which is 800-799-7233, or you can text HOME to 741-741. And of course, in case of an emergency, please dial 911. And in addition, you can reach out to both of us through the Help Save Foundation. On top of all this, so today we're going to be talking about impact statements. We've been getting a lot of questions and a lot of phone calls because of the courts opening up in regards to how to write an impact statement and what an impact statement means. Sherry's going to go through some of the key factors of an impact statement. And in the end, I am going to share my screen and I am going to give you a personal look at my own impact statement. The importance of this is it's beyond. For some of us women, it is literally the only time, and men, it is the only time that our voice can be heard in the court systems. So I'd like you to really listen to what Sherry has to say, and then after we say our byes for the day, we are going to switch over, share the screen, and you'll be able to see the impact statement that I wrote for my court hearing. So go ahead, Sherry.
Thanks, Jen. So I am sure, and I hope anyway, that many of you remember the pivotal moment in the 2018 Dr. Nassar USA Gymnastics sentencing. Close to 160 women stood up and gave their victim impact statements. Yes, it was heart-wrenching to see that many women had been sexually abused, and many of their cries for help and reports of said abuse were ignored. However, you cannot deny how powerful that moment was when they faced their abuser and they let him know just how his behavior and his ongoing abuse had affected their lives. Victim impact statements allow victims the opportunity to explain to the court how a crime committed against them impacted them physically, emotionally, and financially. The statement from the victim usually includes information the court would not know otherwise. This can help influence the decision-making process that goes into sentencing. A victim may choose to read their own statement, or they can have an advocate, the DA, or a judge read it out loud on their behalf when fear, nerves, or other emotions make it too difficult for them to read it themselves. A victim may also choose to have the judge read the statement silently to themselves if it contains information that they do not wish to have shared publicly in open court. The decision depends on what the victim is most comfortable with, and sometimes it is a last-minute decision based on how full the courtroom is that day, or how the victim feels emotionally when the time comes to provide the statement. Stating how the crime has impacted them can be a difficult thing to do, especially publicly. However, it can be a very healing process for some victims. It gives a sense of empowerment and control in a situation where often victims feel powerless. Before I hand it over to Jen, please note that there are now resources online via email and telephone to assist with victim impact statements. So you can now anonymously get support and guidance around how to concisely write your statement within the comfort of your own home. VSS or victimsupportservices.org is just one resource. They give tips right online without having to connect with anyone if you don't want to. But they also have a 24-hour crisis hotline and an escape button, which I know we've talked about before, right on their site. Thank you very much. Jen?
So before I give a little bit of insight and show you guys the victim impact statement that I wrote for my court hearing against my abuser, I just want to go over a couple things. It is extremely important that we are given the right to write victim impact statements. A lot of times what happens in these court proceedings is that the abuser does not want a trial by jury. And so they decide that they're going to plead out. So if we have a trial by jury, then typically if you're capable of sitting on trial, then you will go in front of the judge and in front of the jury, and you will talk about exactly what happened to you. And you'll be able to elaborate on the things that really happened that brought you to the place you are today as far as being in court. In most cases, they're cowards, just like they are in real life. That's why they're abusers, and that's why they're abusing men and women that they absolutely should not be putting their hands on. So they choose to plead guilty. And what happens when you plead guilty is that now the courts, not in a way that they mean to, but they've now taken the power and how you feel about it away from you, because you're never allowed to tell your story. So now you go on and you have all this stuff still bottled up inside you, because even though your abuser has been sentenced, which in Massachusetts is usually 2.5 years and a joke, you don't have any say in the matter. You weren't able, the judge only hears the parts that were brought up by the DA's office. They don't necessarily hear the whole story and what you've been through. And as Sherry said, how it affects you physically, mentally, and emotionally. So when I found out that Brian was pleading guilty, they said, you have the right to an impact statement. And at the time I had no idea what it was. So I had to look it up, and I saw that this was my chance to tell the judge and everybody in the courtroom my side of the story, because they hadn't heard it. They had heard these details, but they were vivid details because we didn't get into much because he pled guilty. So by pleading guilty, he didn't want the court to know what he had did. He didn't want the judge to know, and he certainly didn't want anyone in that courtroom to know the logistics of what he had done to me. So my impact statement did not take me long. I like to go over this with everyone that asks me. Music is an outlet for me. Music is what really opens me up to all of my creativity. So I literally sat at a skate park one day while both of my sons were riding their scooters many years ago. I put a set of headphones on and I started listening to music. And as I started going, I started writing. And it becomes easier as you start doing it, because all of a sudden stuff just starts flowing and you start remembering things and you just start putting it on paper. And at the end of it, I had an impact statement that was about 7 pages long, front and back. Took me 6 minutes and 44 seconds to read it, which you will see. And the court actually they came to me after my impact statement was read in court and said, here's the audio from the actual court hearing of you reading your impact statement. And we're giving this to you because we know that you're going to do big things through your foundation. And we want people to understand how hard this was for you to get here. And sure enough, what you're going to see is our YouTube video, which I did put it to pictures. So you're going to see pictures with it. You're going to hear rustling of papers throughout the impact statement. That has to do with the fact that Brian's attorney absolutely did not want to hear what I had to say. And of course, because I'm standing in front of the judge and I'm at a microphone and I'm speaking to everybody in the court, he had no choice to hear what I had to say. But his lawyer, in the meantime, started rustling papers so that it was harder for him to hear the words and to hear what he had done to me and how it had affected me. At the end of the day, your impact statement is extremely important. It's not just important for the court system, it's important for you. I was able to really move forward and to find peace in writing my impact statement. I remember when it was done and I had read it to several people to make sure that I was okay and that I was going to be able to read it in front of the courtroom without being too emotional, which you'll hear of course, that didn't work. And I was very emotional in reading it, but I was at that point reliving parts of my life that I felt more comfortable reliving in an impact statement than I did had I had to be on trial, getting bombarded by his lawyers trying to make it seem like these things didn't happen to me. So really utilize your impact statement as a time for you to heal, a time for you to get out everything that's happened to you and to let the world know. And I say the world, it's really a courtroom, but to me it was the world. Know what had happened to me and the god awful things that were done, so that the judge understood where I was and how horrible of a man this really was. On top of my personal impact statement, in court, there have been several impact statements from other victims of Brian that have been brought forth. And like Sherry said earlier, they're not around, like meaning they weren't in state, they weren't here, they weren't at my trial. And so they were given to the judge, and the judge did read them on his own. And understand that it's important. So, you know, if you're not an only victim and you know there's other victims out there, have them write a statement, because their statement can be read by the judge. It shows a pattern. It shows a pattern of what these men and women are all about, and that it didn't just end or begin with you. And again, that statement it's very important, and it's a piece of you. So before we go, we're going to say our byes now. And I'm going to flip right over to the YouTube. So bear with me for a second while I share our screen. I'm going to flip right over. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, of course, you can reach out to Sherry or I. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Or maybe I'm not going to share my screen.
Name, ma'am?
My name is Jennifer Blum.
All right, ma'am, what is it you'd like to say about the sentencing issue?
I like to say that it's hard to understand fear unless you've actually experienced it. I spent all but 3 years of my adult life living in fear, all the time trying to keep my head together and be strong enough to survive and raise my sons. I feared the man I lived with. I feared the man that claimed he loved me like no other. You promised Brian to protect me, and you were the only person who ever wanted to hurt me. I had no one to protect me from you. I knew early on that I wasn't getting away from you. You made sure of that. I lived 13 years of my life in survival mode, and that's how I got by day to day. There are many nights that I questioned that I would even be alive to see the next day. I can't count the amount of days that I was able to scoop my voice up fast enough to escape you in that house. I am very aware of what you're capable of. In fact, you made sure I was aware of that to keep my fear alive. I stayed quiet and suffered silently to protect the people I knew and loved. No one was safe. You threatened me with death to my closest loved ones. You ruined so many relationships I had with friends and family in fear that they would see what you were doing to me and try to help. You warned me what would happen if I had ever gone to help. You brainstormed me into believing that there was no help, and if I had gone for help, there was no place that I could run or hide that you couldn't find me. That fear is what kept me silent. That fear is what stopped me from getting help. On the morning of September 1st, 2014, when our son Hunter brought me that horrific phone call of you outlining how you were going to kill us, I saw that same fear in him. You had successfully put that fear in all of us. We fear for our lives. I had done it for so long, but there before me was my son, scared of his own father. Not only because of the words you spoke, but because of everything he had witnessed throughout the years. Even still, that fear you instilled in me kept me in the police department station parking lot for 45 minutes, crying my eyes out, not knowing if I was making the right decision, not knowing if getting help was possibly the last thing I would ever do. There have been so many questions asked of us. Finding the strength to relive what we have fought so hard to forget has been our biggest challenge. It's been very hard having to face the impact this has had on our sons. When Hunter was asked how long he has seen his father abusing his mother, he replied, "As long as I can remember." He admitted to not sleeping at night due to all of his father's screaming. He remembered things I worked so hard to forget. He remembers you asking me which wall I wanted my head splattered on. He also remembers you walking into a room that I was sitting in and saying that looking at me made you want to slit my throat. He remembers all the times you put your hands around my neck, suspending me from the ground. He saw me gasping for air. He saw my face changing colors. He admitted that he could not sleep at night knowing whether his mother would wake up the next day. You have been able to convince your family that my sons and I are liars. How dare you take the hell you have put us through away from us by calling us liars? You insulted us so much that your mother, their grandmother, went as far as to demand that your sister convince me not to testify. that it would be in my best interest to drop these charges, that this was my fault. I instigated you, and that's why I got what I deserved. It was easier for your mother to ignore what happened to us than to face and admit that she had raised a monster, and instead of getting him the help he needed, she pretended it wasn't happening. She chose to blame me instead of helping us. You blamed me. You said it was my fault, and I always deserved it. Well, what about Cheryl, Jackie, and Chrissy, who were all abused before me? And what about Nicole and Heather, who have been abused after me? We all deserved it. You are one man. We are 6 women, and somehow it has all been our fault. I know now that it is not my fault. I know now that it is not me. The last conversation you had with Hunter, you called him a pussy and a snitch. You called a 12-year-old boy a snitch for finally having the courage to tell me what was going on at your house and the consistent abuse towards your wife. You called him a snitch and a pussy for protecting himself and his little brother from having to endure watching another woman suffer at your hands. As his parents, it is one of our many jobs to protect our children. Our son Hunter grew up trying to protect me. He grew up protecting his little brother from having to see what he wished he never had. Hunter is not a pussy, nor is he a snitch. He is brave, and he has more courage than I could have ever imagined. Far too fast. You took his innocence, you took his childhood, and you will never serve enough time to make up for all he's lost. It wasn't my idea for Hunter to come forward. I didn't want him involved. He insisted that he had a voice, and he needed to be heard, and I didn't take that away from him. He has been seriously affected by what he has been subjected to, and if he needed to speak out, I wasn't going to stop him. By wanting a plea, you have once again taken our voices, and I understand you don't want to hear what you've done. We don't want to live with the nightmares you created for us, but we can't forget them. He is here today because he deserves to hear you admit your guilt. This is the closest sorry he will ever get from you. He deserves the acknowledgement of what you have done. I asked Hunter if there was anything he wanted me to say on his behalf that I hadn't. Hunter said he wanted Brian's wife Heather to know that he and Mason really liked her, and that it was very hard for him to see her going through what she saw me go through for all those years. And if Heather were here, I would be addressing her, but to her I say, Heather, I want you to know that my sons talked very good about you. They enjoyed the short time they spent with you, and I appreciate the kindness and love you gave them. It was too hard for my boys to watch and hear the all too familiar screams and cries for help. If I can say one thing to her, it would be that it is not her fault. And that is all.
Anything else you'd like to say, ma'am?